Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Merkur Tourbillon reference 2759793. This watch is available from merkurwatchgroup.com for $399 which is €344 respectively. You can use the discount code MERKURWATCH088 to get $20 discount off any watch from merkurwatchgroup.com. So for example, if you use the MERKURWATCH088 discount code on this piece, it will reduce the price to $379 which is €327 respectively. So firstly, let's look at the hard shell travel case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in this hard shell travel case, camouflage print, and on the lid it has an embossed Merkur text logo. Good quality, aesthetically pleasing, but however, subjectively I'm going to be critical of it because it's not appropriate for a daily wear or dress piece. Clearly this Merkur Tourbillon is a daily wear or dress piece. It's not a military aesthetic or field watch, and of course camouflage print hard shell travel cases would be more appropriate for that. I previously reviewed another Merkur piece, and that came in a vinyl or PU leather watch roll, which was green, very aesthetically pleasing, and of course that would have been more appropriate for a Merkur Tourbillon, but this is what they're using nonetheless. Good attention to detail, because on the rubber zip pull we have the Merkur text logo embossed in white. So I'll undo the zip and show you the interior. Interior is fully upholstered with black velour fabric to a good standard. In the underside of the lid we have an elasticated web pocket which houses the items which I'll show you. In the base there's a foam cutout panel which is also upholstered with black felt to a good standard, and this does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping, so it's a good quality hard shell travel case. I just think it would look better if it were plain black or alternatively plain grey for example, or better than that would be if they used their green vinyl or PU leather watch roll which they have used on other pieces, but it is good quality. So with regards to the items that come with the piece, it comes with this owner's instruction manual. Clear concise diagrams, the instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Hangzhou caliber 32D0E Tourbillon. Now this is bilingual both in English and Chinese, which is good, and it also has high definition photographs of each of the Merkur pieces in their current collection. So not only does it detail this piece, the Merkur Tourbillon, it also details every watch in their current collection. So as you can see, it's a very thick owner's instruction manual as a result. And lastly, one also gets this Merkur Watch Co. Peking branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. Now, the one thing that's notably absent is a warranty card. For example, a plastic warranty card detailing the terms and conditions of the 12-month international warranty. On a positive note, this Merkur Tourbillon is covered by a 12-month warranty, but I'd like to see Merkur add that because it would be good for collectors to see the warranty is activated from the date of purchase for 12 months. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 41.8mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 49.6mm, a thickness of 12.8mm and a lug width of 22mm. The genuine leather strap is grey suede and it tapers from 22mm at the lugs down to the buckle and tang. Solid 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang, and it's laser etched with Merkur Watch Group with high definition laser etching. So to clarify, it's laser etched versus being engraved, and this is a clear production cost cutting measure because engraving is more expensive to do than laser etching. I personally prefer to see engraving at this price point, €327. I appreciate it is a low tier piece and one has to be magnanimous and realistic. There are going to be some production cost cutting measures, but laser etching, one can be magnanimous about it with low tier pieces at the lower end of €0 to €500, but at €327 it has to be engraved for high quality feel. On a positive note, nice heavy gauge to the solid 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang, flawless mirror polishing to the top side, underside and flanks, and I like it's got this double bar rather than just a standard C-shaped buckle, and you can see it's very aesthetically pleasing. Flawless mirror polishing to the flanks, no sharp edge to the undercut to the flanks, no sharp corners, so it's very well finished and it is correctly proportioned. On the suede leather strap we have two keepers. Now usually on this style of strap the first keeper would be fixed, but Merkur haven't done that. We've got two sliding keepers, and again this is subjective. Some collectors prefer first fixed keeper rather than a second and first keeper both sliding. It really comes down to your personal preference. I personally prefer the quality of a first fixed keeper, and one could consider that to be a production cost cutting measure when they manufacture the strap. We have a double dome sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver ring around the dial at 12 o'clock and the silver ring around the tourbillon, which is a flying tourbillon. So, blued hands are heat treated, and I want to give due credit to Merkur here because they're correctly proportioned, but the other thing I like about them is these are proper blued hands. So to clarify, often low-tier Chinese brands between €0 and €500 price point use the production cost-cutting measure of painting the hands blue, or alternatively anodizing the hands blue, rather than heat treating, because heat treating hands adds production time and adds production cost and therefore diminishes profit margin per piece. So we'll often see blued hands on low-tier Chinese pieces, but they're not actually heat-treated blue, as per mid-tier pieces costing €500 to €5,000 due to the aforementioned production cost. But credit where credit's due, Merkur do heat-treat the blued hands. They are proper blued hands, and the other thing I like is the movement. It also uses blued screws, and again, the blued screws are actually heat-treated blue. They're not painted blue, they're not anodized blue, they are heat-treated to give them their blue look. My favourite aspect of this piece is the dial. It is very aesthetically pleasing. So it's reflective. Now, to clarify, it's not a glossy enamel blue dial, nor is it a sunray dial, nor is it a textured dial. But yet it does have a silver metallic property to it. So when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle, it does have excellent quality clarity to the sapphire crystal, and of course the AL coating works very well. But it's got this lovely silver tone to the base metal, and that shows through the purple and blue paints. So it's rather like an enamel dial, but the finish of it is rather like the reflective property of a meteorite dial. So really what it looks like is a purple and blue meteorite pattern to it. And we've got this slight metallic finish because the silver base metal shines through the purple and blue paints. It is very aesthetically pleasing. What I like about it is it's not too shiny as per a glossy enamel blue or enamel purple dial. It's not too shiny, so it's not highly reflective. And when you look at the piece straight on, the AR coating on the underside of the double dome sapphire crystal works very well because we've got perfect clarity to the tourbillon, perfect clarity to the dial, and also the dial itself. So I really like that. It is shiny, does look very nice, and I like the way it's got different tones. So it's got a violet purple and also a light blue, and also the silver base metal of the dial itself shining through. And they've done a very good job of it because it really does look rather like an enamel dial, and it's just got that lovely reflective property. I like the way it changes colour in the light from a light blue to a purple violet tone, and it's just a very interesting dial to look at. Rather than just making a plain purple, violet, or alternatively plain blue dial, they've done this. It's rather like a meteorite pattern to it without the texture. So excellent. What I like about it is the dial execution. Now, I like the silver mirror polish ring around the main dial with Roman numerals in black, and also like the silver ring around the flying tourbillon. It looks very well balanced. Now, they're different diameters. Of course, the tourbillon ring is larger than the white dial with black Roman numerals, but nonetheless, the dial has good symmetry because we have the main dial at 12 and then the flying tourbillon at 6. The other thing I like about it is the dial for the hand is not over branded with text or specifications, so I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way. We simply have the Merkur text logo at 12 and then Peking in red, and this does add interest to it. And of course they're right to be proud of Merkur having heritage and producing their watches in Peking in China, and they've printed that on the dial to give balance to it. It's good. They haven't over branded the dial with unnecessary text or specification. For example, they haven't printed the word tourbillon on it, or alternatively the water resistance rating, which is 30 metres. This is negligible information for a daily wear or dress piece. So dial looks balanced, it looks clean. Proportion of the alpha blued hour hand and the alpha blued minute hand are correct. One can immediately differentiate between the two. The quality of the printing on the dial is excellent. It's high definition and crisp. The black minute ticks on the chaptering are sharp. They're not too thick and blurry. The Roman numerals are fine. The font is crisp, it's sharp, it's high definition, it's not too thick, not too blurry. So dial is easy to read despite having a small diameter. And I really like the flying tourbillon, the way it has this silver ring around it, and I like that one can see straight through the piece from the front sapphire crystal through the exhibition case back, which is glazed with mineral crystal. It adds interest to it, and the quality of the finishing to the flying tourbillon itself is fantastic for a low tier piece between €0 and €500. At €327, this is a fantastic finished tourbillon. So dial is very aesthetically pleasing. We have a Solid 316L grade stainless steel bezel, which is domed profile. Now, they've made the correct decision here by using a domed profile to the bezel versus flat profile, because this has a double domed sapphire crystal and also it has convex curvature to the flanks of the case, and the top of the lugs are also curved. So this does give the piece a dress watch aesthetic and also gives it a vintage Art Deco style to it. So the curvature is good because it allows the edge of the double dome sapphire crystal with a bevel to project above it, and I like the way the bevel on the edge of the sapphire crystal catches the light when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle. What I like about this piece above all else is the lack of thickness. It is a tourbillon, so one has to expect a thicker calibre because it does have a very high power reserve of 80 hours. Now, often tourbillon calibres and also high power reserve movements with 80 hours, for example, are often very thick, and one has to expect them to be 13mm plus as a result, especially if they use an exhibition caseback, which adds thickness, and of course, in addition, a double dome sapphire crystal versus a flat sapphire crystal. This does have an exhibition caseback. It has a tourbillon and 80 hours and a double dome sapphire crystal. I would expect it to be 13 or 13.5, but it's not. That's what I want you to be mindful of. This is only 12.8mm thick. That is very impressive. 12.8 for a tourbillon with 80 hours and a double dome sapphire crystal and exhibition caseback is fantastic. Merkur deserve credit because we are not looking at a mid-tier piece between 500 and 5,000 euro. We're not looking at a high-tier piece at 10,000 plus euro. But this is a tourbillon with 80 hours and it is only 12.8. That is very impressive, and they really deserve credit for that because it is technically difficult to house a thicker tourbillon calibre in a case with this depth, because it does have a larger barrel to provide 80 hours as one would expect, and of course that would normally mean 30mm plus of case depth. So they've done a very good job. I like that it's got a double dome sapphire crystal because it's got a very low dome to it, which almost looks flat. But when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see the benefits because it's curved on the underside, curved on the top side, versus a single dome sapphire crystal, which is flat on the underside. Had they used a single dome sapphire crystal, it would have been a mistake because having a flat underside would have made this like a magnifying lens, and of course one would have got the characteristic distortion and magnification effect when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle. But because it's curved on the underside and curved on the top side, one gets the perfect clarity. Even when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you don't see any distortion effects, you don't see any magnification. And again, they made the correct decision by not using a boxed top hat double dome sapphire crystal, which would have added 2mm of thickness to this piece. It wouldn't be 12.8, it would be 14.8, which of course would be far too thick and top heavy. Low profile, AR coating is fantastic, clarity of the sapphire crystal is stellar. So, domed profile to the bezel is correct choice versus flat. What I like about this piece is mirror polishing throughout is stellar. So, to clarify and to remind you, I've referred to this in previous reviews, but I will reiterate it for the benefit of those of you that have not heard it. When I look at a mirror polished case, regardless of price point, mid-tier, low tier, high tier, the first area I look at is in between the lugs. Now bear in mind, I've reviewed over 500 pieces from low tier to mid tier to high tier. The reason why I look at in between the lugs first is because, regardless of price point, low tier and mid tier, in between the lugs, the mirror polish section is an area that often low-tier Chinese brands will use as a production cost-cutting measure. They'll simply leave it brush satin finished or just machined, which is rough. It will be satin finish versus mirror polish because mirror polishing in between the lugs internally adds production time and therefore adds production costs per piece, therefore diminishes profit margin per piece. So what they'll do is, rather than mirror polishing in between the lugs, they'll just leave it machined, alternatively just brush satin finish, which is less expensive. Merkur deserve credit here because the quality of the mirror polishing in between the lugs on both the 6 and the 12 o'clock side is done to the same standard as the bezel, is done to the same standard as the top of the lugs, is done to the same standard as the flanks of the case, is done to the same standard as the underside of the case. Every facet of this case, the head of the piece, bezel, in between the lugs, flanks, top of the lugs, the underside, is fantastic. So to put this into perspective, when I look at the polishing, yes, one has to be magnanimous and realistic. This is not Grand Seiko Zaratsu level. But nonetheless, we are not looking at €0 to €500 level low tier mirror polishing. This is mid-tier level mirror polishing. So when I refer to mid-tier, I'm talking about €500 to €5,000 level. So, quality of the mirror polishing is flawless. In between the lugs, bezel, flanks, top of the lugs, underside of the case. This is fantastic. They really deserve credit for this because it does increase production costs per piece in between the lugs, but they've actually done a fantastic job of the mirror polishing on the internals of the lugs and also this portion, which is convex profile. It's very well finished. This case doesn't have any sharp edges on the undercuts to the flanks because we've got large mirror polish bevels. Tips of the lugs also have bevels, so there's no sharp corners. This enhances comfort level and feel good factor, and I'll show you the benefits of this in the wrist shots because we don't have this sharp crisp edge on the undercuts to the flanks. It's got nice curvature to the flanks, but also the convex profile to the flanks means we don't have this sharp crisp edge. This is a very comfortable piece to wear, and they fully maximised, they fully optimised this being only 12.8 because it is a very snug fitting piece, bearing in mind it's a high power reserve 80-hour tourbillon. Fantastic case finishing. So let's look at this strap in detail. So genuine leather strap, suede finish to the top side, very aesthetically pleasing grey tone to it, and I think the grey suede is the correct choice because it does complement the silver base metal to the dial with the violet, purple and also light blue paint on it. It does look very good. I think the grey matches the silver tone of the base metal dial. So it's very soft and supple, doesn't require any breaking in. It feels as soft and supple as a Halloween shell cordovan strap or Hirsch calf leather strap. That's how soft and supple it is. Doesn't require any breaking in. And what I like about it is it's not too thick as per a padded strap. It does taper down in thickness, so it's thicker and reinforced at the spring bar end where it needs to be more robust, but then it tapers down in thickness down to the buckle and tang gradually. So it is a thick suede leather strap, so therefore it's going to be durable. It's not going to split and crack. That's the benefit, but nonetheless doesn't feel too stiff as per a padded leather strap. It actually feels surprisingly soft and supple, so you don't need to break it in. Now, there are enough holes in it to fit from a 6 to 7.5 inch wrist size, which is good. Buckle and tang is also correctly proportioned, and I like it's not a C-shape or U-shaped buckle and tang. We've got this double bar, and this square buckle is very good because it looks good, correctly proportioned, and of course no sharp edges to it. They've done a good job of it. I would just prefer to see it engraved versus laser etched, as I've detailed. Let's look at the underside of the strap. So contrasting tan liner to it, and as you can see it's debossed rather than embossed with genuine leather, and we've also got Merkur watch, which is good. They've done a good job of that. 22 refers to the lug width. What I like about the tan liner is it's perfectly smooth, so it's calf leather, matching stitching. So what I like about it is on the top side we've got the same grey tone stitching to match the grey suede. On the underside we've got tan tone stitching around the edge to match the tan calf leather liner. Perfectly smooth, comfort level is good, no loose stitches. Let's look at the other side. Other side is debossed with Merkur, so good attention to detail. I'm pleased it's not just a sterile strap. So really the only negative to it is the production cost cutting measure of laser etching Merkur watch group versus engraving, which of course would be higher end. But one has to be magnanimous about these kind of production cost cutting measures. Now, on a positive note, I'm pleased to see quick release stainless steel spring bars versus standard stainless steel spring bars because we don't have pierced lugs with holes in, and sometimes with these kind of thick suede leather straps, of course, it can be difficult to depress the spring bar in between the mirror polished lugs without slipping off the spring bar and scuffing and scratching the mirror polished lugs. So quick release stainless steel spring bars are the correct choice, makes it easy to exchange the strap. Exhibition case back, screw down. Now, again, I want to give credit to Merkur here because they could have used the production cost cutting measure of a pressed on exhibition case back in order to reduce production costs. They haven't. They've used the more expensive option, which is a screw down case back. Provides an effective hermetic seal to 30 metres, which is perfectly acceptable for a daily wear or dress piece. And it does a good job of displaying this skeletonized Hangzhou caliber 32D0E tourbillon. Mirror polishing to the circumference is fantastic. The milled slots are deburred and chamfered very well, so no sharp edges. Very flat and low profile. What I like about the exhibition case back is how flat it is. We are not looking at a bubble back case back, which is very deep and therefore makes the head of the piece sit on top of the wrist like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel. This is a very flat case back, so this enhances comfort level and feel good factor. Now, subjectively, one could be critical and say, well, they could have engraved the circumference with a specification, reference number for the piece, but they haven't. I think it is acceptable because it is a production cost cutting measure, but on a positive note, it does make it very smooth, and the mirror polishing is done to a very high level as per the head of the piece. What I like about it is screw down case back provides a better hermetic seal than a pressed on case back, but doesn't add additional thickness. This is still a very flat case back. Now, the negative of it is, I want you to be aware of, it's glazed with mineral crystal versus sapphire crystal. So this is a production cost cutting measure in order to maximise profit margin per piece. Sapphire crystal glazing is more expensive than mineral crystal. However, subjectively one could argue, well, this doesn't need sapphire crystal in the case back, strictly speaking. Unlike the front of the piece, which is sapphire crystal glazed, that's an area that's prone to being scuffed and scratched with daily wear and tear. That's a given. The exhibition case back is just rubbing against the wrist. So unlike the front of the piece, it's not prone to being scuffed and scratched. Yes, mineral crystal is not as hard and scratch resistant as sapphire crystal, but the clarity is the same. So yes, I think it's an acceptable production cost cutting measure. Had they used mineral crystal in the front, or alternatively K1 hardened glass, of course that would have been unacceptable at €327 price point. So they've made the correct decision. They've used the production cost cutting measure of sapphire crystal in the front is good, mineral crystal in the back to save on production cost. And one has to be magnanimous because this is powered by high quality Hangzhou caliber 32D0E tourbillon. It's an expensive movement. So I think it is okay, but I would prefer to see sapphire crystal. Nonetheless, does a fantastic job of displaying the mirror polished bevels to the skeletonized Hangzhou caliber 32D0E tourbillon. Blued screws are heat treated versus being painted or anodized, and what I like about this tourbillon movement is the skeletonization is very aesthetically pleasing, but the bevels to the skeletonization have been mirror polished to perfection. The gears are mirror polished to perfection. This is a very well finished Hangzhou caliber, and it's one of the better finished Hangzhou calibers. I really like the finishing of the 32D0E tourbillon. It's high grade. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. So just bear with me. I'm going to do back up the strap to make it easy to handle the piece. So coin edge crown, knurled crown. And this is often referred to as a pumpkin crown due to the proportions and shape of it. But it's a knurled crown versus a coin edge or gear tooth crown. So sterile. Now, I'm not going to be critical of this. Normally at this price point, €327, I of course would be critical of a low tier piece having a sterile crown and not signed with Merkur, alternatively an M for the Merkur emblem. In this case, I'm not going to be critical. It has a mirror polished cap to it because it is a dress piece or daily wear piece, and it is acceptable on a dress piece or a daily wear piece such as a tourbillon to have a sterile unsigned crown. One also has to appreciate the diameter of it because it's not practical to engrave Merkur. It's a text logo which is too large. They'd have to reduce the fonts, the size of the letters too small to be legible. The alternative would be they could use an M in the same font as Merkur and sign it, but nonetheless I think it's okay to have a sterile crown on a daily wear dress piece due to the aesthetic of it. So it's like a pumpkin crown and of course knurled finish. Now the quality of the knurling is excellent. It's grippy and tactile, so easy to get good purchase with your index finger and thumb, but not sharp. That's the point. Doesn't dig into the skin. So it's grippy, it's tactile, easy to manually wind, but not being sharp. So large chamfer which deletes the tips of the knurled teeth. So they've done a good job of it. Now, the one negative subjectively of this having a very high power reserve of 80 hours is it does of course need additional clockwise turns. So to put this into perspective, the industry standard for automatic such as the NH35A and the SW200-1, which you're all familiar with, they have 41-hour power reserves and therefore they take 40 clockwise turns. So when the mainspring is fully exhausted, when the movement stopped dead, to manually wind an NH35A or an SW200-1 with 41 hours power reserve, they take 40 clockwise turns. And that will fully wind them to their absolute maximum. This has 80 hours, nearly double the 41 hours of an SW200-1 and an NH35A respectively. Therefore, 40 clockwise turns isn't going to suffice, as you would expect. It takes 80 clockwise turns, so it's laborious. But one has to appreciate the benefit of it. Because it doesn't have 41 hours power reserve, it has 80. You only need to manually wind it every 3 days, which is excellent. So you do need to manually wind at 80 clockwise turns, which is time consuming and laborious, but then you can wear the piece for 3 days before you need to manually wind it again. The negative is, of course, it doesn't have a rotor, it's not an automatic, so therefore you can't put it on an automatic watch winder. You can't simply wind it by wearing it 8 to 12 hours per day as per an automatic. That's something to be mindful of, but that's just a characteristic of manual wind tourbillons like this Hangzhou caliber 32D0E. I don't regard it as detrimental. 80 clockwise turns does take some time, but you only need to do it every 3 days, and I think it is okay. I do like 80 hours because that is nearly double the power reserve of an automatic. So, in terms of smoothness, it doesn't feel rough or gritty like manually winding a PT5000, it feels smoother. In terms of smoothness, it does feel similar to manually winding a PT5000, it feels smoother than a PT5000. It feels similar to manually winding an SW200-1 or an NH35A. It's not as smooth as a 9015, and it does have more resistance because, of course, it does have a larger barrel and, of course, a larger mainspring. And that's a characteristic of high power reserve calibers. They have a large barrel to provide 80 hours, and, of course, one can feel there's more tension in the mainspring when you're manually winding. So it does feel heavier in terms of resistance than an SW200-1 or an NH35A, but in terms of smoothness, it feels similar. Not as smooth as a 9015, but it is smoother than a PT5000, which feels stiff, it feels rough, it feels gritty. So this is better. I like the smoothness, I like the refinement, and although it does take 80 turns, the proportion of the crown is good because you can easily get a grip of it with your index finger and thumb to manually wind. So it's large enough to be grippy. Feels good. Now, pulling it out to the first click position is the final click. As this is a tourbillon, which is often the case with tourbillon movements, this does not hack. So manual winding, but no hacking. That's something to note. So we're now in the time setting position. On a positive note, there is no date complication, so therefore there isn't a phantom date setting position. That's the benefit. But the negative is, of course, the tourbillon doesn't hack. The reason why the tourbillon doesn't hack was if this had hacking, it could cause damage when the tourbillon stops abruptly. And of course, that would be detrimental to the tourbillon. So tourbillon calibers often don't have hacking for that reason, to prevent damage occurring to the tourbillon by stopping and starting it abruptly. So it's acceptable not to have hacking on a tourbillon caliber like this 32D0E. So we're now in the time setting position. Now if you look at the blued alpha hands, it feels smooth, light resistance to it. Feels lighter than an NH35A, feels lighter than an SW200-1. In terms of resistance, it actually feels very similar to a 9015. It's got that refined feeling to it. What I like about it is there's minimal backplay. When you rotate the knurled crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's an almost immediate response to the blued alpha hand. You don't need to take up a lot of slack in the gearing, so it feels very refined, feels nice and tight. And I like the smoothness of it. Medium resistance, very similar to the medium resistance of a 9015 or a 9039, which you may be familiar with. Definitely feels smoother than an NH35A or an SW200-1, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. And what I like about it is it feels balanced. So when you cycle through the 12 hours, it doesn't get heavier or lighter. It's got that medium smooth resistance all the way through the 12 hours. Both clockwise and anti-clockwise, it feels exactly the same. There's no discernible difference. So it doesn't feel stiff, doesn't feel rough or gritty, doesn't have excess backplay, less backplay than an NH35A, less backplay than an SW200-1. Backplay actually feels similar and looks similar to a 9015 or a 9039. It feels that kind of refinement level. So I like it. Feels good. Pushing it back in has got a nice positive click, and that reinstates the 30 metres of hermetic seal. Now, I'm not going to be critical of it having a push-pull crown and 30 metres. 30 metres is perfectly acceptable for a tourbillon because it's a daily wear piece or a dress piece. It's not meant to be a dive piece, it's not meant to be used for swimming. 30 metres is perfectly adequate for a daily wear or dress piece or a tourbillon like this. The other thing is I'm not going to be critical of it not having a screw-down crown because this is a manual wind. We're not looking at an automatic here. So it would actually be detrimental if this had a screw-down crown because every 3 days you'd have to unscrew the crown, pull out the crown to manually wind it. This does not have that problem because in the closed position, because it's a push-pull crown, you can manually wind it with it closed and the 30 metres of hermetic seal instated. So it's good because you can simply manually wind it every 3 days, 80 clockwise turns with the crown closed. You don't need to pull it out, then manually wind, as per a screw-down crown. So actually it's beneficial rather than detrimental. And the manual winding feels very smooth. So I like the refinement of it, and I don't regard 80 clockwise turns as detrimental. It's a good quality knurled push-pull crown. Proportions are good, feels good, grippy and tactile, but without being sharp and digging into the finger and the thumb. So I'll give you a wrist shot and see how it fits my 8-inch wrist. Now just bear with me, I'm going to remove my Concord 40. So as I've detailed, this suede leather strap will fit from a 6 to 7.5 inch wrist size, so the majority of collectors, which is good. I can just do it up on my 8-inch wrist. Just bear with me, I'll get the end of the strap into the buckle. So the maximum this will fit is an 8-inch wrist. Now I can just engage, just bear with me, both of the keepers with the end of the strap. As you can see, I'll do it on camera just to show you for clarity. So you can see, this is with the strap done up tight. Now I can't slide my index finger beneath it. To be comfortable, this would need to be half an inch longer. So really, 6 to 7.5 is the maximum. Yes, I can do it up if I pull the strap tight, and I can just engage the end of the strap in the 2 sliding keepers. But really, 7.5 is the maximum. There are enough holes to size this from a 6-inch minimum to 7.5 inch, as you can see. If this were half an inch longer, yes, it would fit my wrist correctly. It's tight at the moment, but it's good enough for a 6 to 7. Now, what I like about it is, they have made the correct decision by using a 22 lug width. If this were a 39 or 40, I would say the lug width is too wide at 22, but we're looking at a 41.8, which is just 0.2 millimeters below 42. Yes, it is a large diameter piece. Yes, it does wear with wrist presence, and yes, it does dominate the wrist. So I would say to you straight away, if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, you can rule this piece out, because needless to say, at 41.8, it does dominate the wrist. This is going to be far too large in diameter for a smaller 6 to 7 inch wrist. You're going to find it too large in diameter, and also you're going to find the lug to lug too long at 49.6. There's going to be overhang on the tips of the lugs. Even on my large 8-inch wrist, this is a long case. You'll know this from my previous reviews. 48mm is the perfect sweet spot because that fits 6 to 7 inch wrist to perfection. It also fits 7 to 8 inch wrist to perfection. This is 1.6mm too long. However, on a large 7 to 8 inch plus wrist size, it is okay, and one has to be magnanimous because we're not looking at a 39 or a 40 here. This is a large diameter piece, 41.8. It does dominate the wrist. Therefore, it does need length on the lugs, because had they used 48, which is the sweet spot, yes, I would argue that would be better. But then the lugs would actually look short because of the large diameter. So what they've done is to try and balance the length of the case with the diameter, they've lengthened the lugs. So one could argue it does make it more aesthetically pleasing because the lugs have a nice slender taper. 28 is wide versus 20, which would look undersized for a 41.8. The benefit is it means that the strap is 22 and it has a nice gradual taper down to the square buckle and tang. And the strap does need that width to distribute the heft of the piece, but visually to give the balance, because if it were 20 it would look too slender. 22 is correct for a larger 41.8. Now also one has to be magnanimous. Tourbillon movements are larger diameter. Why is that? Well, they have to have a larger barrel. And of course the caliber needs to be large diameter to house a larger diameter barrel. The other thing is this has a high power reserve. We're not looking at a 40 or a 65 hour tourbillon here. We're looking at 80 hours, which is strong specification. But in order to provide 80 hours, this does need a large barrel, and therefore the diameter of the caliber itself needs to be large. And of course, Merkur have to make the case wide enough, and they also have to make it deep enough to house that barrel. So I think it's acceptable to have a large 41.8, but really 7 to 8 inches plus is best suited. 6 to 7, it's too large, and even on my large 8-inch wrist, you can see there is some slight overhang on the tips of the lugs. I think they should have reduced it to 48, the sweet spots. But some collectors would argue, well, it's just marginally above 49.6. I think they could shorten down the length by 1.6. There is some slight overhang. It's okay on my 8-inch wrist. But if you have a 7 to 8-inch wrist size, if you're at the 7-inch end, you might find the lugs to be too long. If you're at the upper end of 8 inches plus, of course, then you'll say, well, it's acceptable. So I would say, ideally, 8 inches plus is the sweet spot for this case. If you have a 7-inch wrist, it's going to be borderline. So really, 7.5 to 8 is better. And of course, the closer you are to an 8-inch wrist size, the better the fit due to the curvature. On a positive note, low profile case back, very snug. What I like about it is this piece is surprisingly thin. It's low profile. 12.8. Now just think about that. We're not looking at a 40 or 65 hour power reserve tourbillon. This is 80 hours, nearly double the power reserve of an NH35A, nearly double the power reserve of an SW200-1. 80 hours is fantastic power reserve. Not only that, of course the tourbillon is a thicker caliber, so one has to be magnanimous. We don't have a flat sapphire crystal, we've got a double dome sapphire crystal. We don't have a pressed on stainless steel caseback, we have a screw down exhibition caseback. Of course, these things add thickness. They've made the correct decision here by reducing it to 30 metres. The reason why I say it's beneficial, normally I'd say it's detrimental to have 30 metres, but if this were 50 or 100 metres, for example, Merkur would have to use a thicker double dome sapphire crystal. They'd also have to use a thicker mineral crystal glazing in the exhibition caseback to withstand 50 or 100 metres of pressure. But, of course, that's not necessary because this is not a dive piece. So, what they've done is they've made it 30 metres with a push-pull crown. They've been able to slim down the thickness of the double dome sapphire crystal, thinner. They've also slimmed down the thickness of the mineral crystal glazing in the exhibition caseback because it only needs to provide 30 metres of hermetic seal, not 50 or 100, respectively. So it's beneficial rather than detrimental because they've slimmed this piece down to below 13 millimetres. Now, normally an 80-hour tourbillon like this with a double dome sapphire crystal exhibition caseback would be 13.5 millimetres thick, and therefore it would look like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel, and it would feel like a top-heavy piece. This actually feels surprisingly balanced. So first thing I like about it is it's only 12.8, below the 13 sweet spot. Second thing I like above all else, this is only 69 grams. It's fantastic. Now, if this were 69 grams on a leather strap and it were a 39, 40 or 41 piece, that would not impress me because that's nothing special. But we're looking at a tourbillon with 80 hours power reserve, with a double dome sapphire crystal and an exhibition caseback, and it's 41.8. This is a large diameter piece, and yet it does not feel top heavy like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel. 69 grams is fantastic. 69 grams is the kind of heft I would expect with a 39mm. It's the kind of heft I would expect with a mechanical manual wind movement without a tourbillon. It's the kind of heft I would expect with a quartz power piece, because 69 grams is very lightweight. But we're looking at a tourbillon with 80 hours here, and I think they've done a good job of reducing it. Now, of course, the benefit of it is, the reason why it lacks heft, even though it's a tourbillon, is because the calibre, the Hangzhou calibre 32D0E, is fully skeletonized. And skeletonizing the movement, yes, it's very aesthetically pleasing, but the other benefit is it actually reduces a lot of the meat from the main plate of the calibre. For example, if this were a regular tourbillon, it would have a solid main plate, and of course that would be more meat, more metal, and that would add additional heft. This would be 10 to 15 grams heavier as a result. But because they fully skeletonized the calibre, they've reduced a lot of the meat from the main plate, and what that means is this actually becomes a very lightweight piece, and it's really down to the calibre itself. 69 grams is fantastic. So they deserve credit for that, and I really like it, the lack of heft. And of course, comfort level and feel good factor are therefore enhanced. Now, 13mm is below the 12.8 sweet spot, 0.2mm thinner. It's not top heavy, it will easily slip underneath the shirt cuff. So there's no loom, we don't need to do a loom test. Let's move on to discussing the calibre. So the movement is my favourite aspect of the piece. This is powered by the Hangzhou calibre 32D0E tourbillon. It's fully skeletonized, as you can see, decorated with blued screws, and it is a flying tourbillon with 80 hours of power reserve. Has 26 joules, it's made in China, has hand winding, but does not have hacking, but that's not detrimental. It's often the case, as I've detailed. Tourbillon calibers do not hack, because if they stopped abruptly and started abruptly, that could cause damage to the tourbillon, which would be detrimental. Runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz, which is good. 80-hour power reserve, that is the main positive of this calibre. We're not looking at 40 hours, we're not looking at 65, we are looking at 80 hours, and you can see it does have a large barrel to provide the power reserve. And as I've detailed, normally high power reserve calibers with 80 hours, they are very thick because the barrel is large diameter, and of course the calibre itself is thicker. This is thin for a tourbillon with a flying tourbillon and also 80 hours of power reserve. And of course, Merkur have fully optimised or fully benefited from this, because you can see, even with a double dome sapphire crystal and exhibition caseback, which is screw down, not pressed on, this is still only 12.8. So we're not looking at a 13.5mm thick piece, which would be far too thick and top heavy. And they've even been able to use a double dome sapphire crystal versus a flat sapphire crystal, which of course does make it very aesthetically pleasing. 12.8 does impress me. 80 hours does impress me. Now, what I like about the movement is the quality of the finishing is excellent. One has to appreciate, we're not looking at a mid-tier piece here costing 500 to 5,000 euro. We're not looking at a high-tier piece costing 10,000 plus. This is a flying tourbillon caliber with 80 hours, and yet it's only €327 price point. It's fully skeletonized, and what I like about it is, where they've skeletonized the main plate, they've got bevels, which are machined and then polished, and the quality of the mirror polishing to the bevels on the skeletonized sections of the main plate is done to a very high level. And as I've detailed, they've also decorated with blued screws, and these are proper blued screws. As I refer to the alpha hands being blued, these are not painted blue, they're not anodized blue, they are heat treated, which increases production costs, but it's the proper way of doing it, because in time, it's not a case where blue paint's going to wear off or patinate, and it's not a case that the anodizing is going to fade with ultraviolet light. When you heat treat the blued hands and you heat treat the blued screws, they are always going to look the same in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, etc. It's the proper way of doing it. Of course, it's more expensive, but it's the way that mid-tier and high-tier blued screws are done. So, excellent to see heat-treated hands, excellent to see heat-treated blued screws, proper blued screws on this piece. Quality of mirror polishing to this caliber is fantastic, and really Hangzhou deserve credit for this, because it's not Merkur that are mirror polishing the movement and they're not heat treating the blued screws, it's actually Hangzhou. Hangzhou are respected. Now when I say respected, I mean in terms of build quality, quality control, materials and finishing. Hangzhou do make good quality tourbillons, and the other thing I like is the quality of the finishing is good. So to put this into perspective, this is a level above other Chinese calibers, such as the PT5000 you're all familiar with. That's made by HK Precision Technology. The problem with that is the finishing is poor quality. It's not finished to the same standard as a standard grade SW200-1, P024 or an ETA 2824-2, to put it into perspective. This Hangzhou caliber 32D0E tourbillon is finished to a higher level than, for example, the PT5000. And it's excellent because this is €327. But what we're seeing here in terms of finishing, in terms of the mirror polishing to the cutouts, the skeletonization, the bevels, the finishing to the heat-treated blued screws, the mirror polishing to the gears, which are also skeletonized. This is mid-tier level finishing to the caliber. The gears, the bevels, the cutouts, the skeletonization, every part of it, it's mid-tier. So mid-tier is 500 to 5,000. This is the kind of tourbillon caliber I would expect to see between 500 and 5,000, not a low-tier Chinese piece at 327. So I really like it, and Hangzhou deserve credit for producing a very high-quality finishing to it. Mirror polishing is fantastic. Polishing to the gearing is fantastic. Quality of the mirror polishing to the bevel is fantastic. And again, the flying tourbillon. Blued screws in the flying tourbillon itself are again heat treated. Quality of the mirror polishing to the tourbillon is fantastic. So it's a very well finished tourbillon, and I like it. I think it's very impressive to see this used in this Merkur reference 2759793 tourbillon. Correct choice. This flying tourbillon is excellent. So technically good, 80 hours. Negatively, subjectively, I could say 80 hours of clockwise turns is the only negative. You do have to give it additional 40 turns versus an automatic. That's just the way it is. But you only have to manually wind it every 3 days. I think it's good. Accuracy is variable. Now, Hangzhou do not state the accuracy of the caliber 32D0E. For example, they don't rate it at -20 to +40 as per an NH35A. What I can tell you is, it can be regulated in 5 positions. However, the accuracy depends on the power reserve. So what I'll explain, what I mean by that is, when this is fully wound to its maximum 80 hours, like all movements, regardless of whether they're automatic or manual wind mechanical movements, they perform at their very best. So for example, if you fully wind an SW200-1 or an NH35A to their maximum 41 hours, then you regulate them in 5 positions, you can attain chronometer accuracy between -4 and +6. Same applies to this Hangzhou caliber 32D0E. When it's fully wound to its maximum 80 hours, yes, you can regulate this in 5 positions and attain -4 to +6. However, That's when it's at 80 hours. When the power reserve is depleted, for example, down to 60, down to 40, down to 20, to 0, exponentially, as the power reserve depletes, the accuracy runs out wider. So, for example, when this is at 80 hours, yes, it can run at between -4 and +6. But then when it drops down to below 40 hours, the accuracy is wider. For example, plus or minus 10 seconds, then plus or minus 20, then plus or minus 30. That's the problem. That's the one negative of it. But one has to be magnanimous. It's just the case with 80-hour tourbillon calibers like this. They do attain chronometer accuracy when they're fully wound, but like all high power reserve movements, for example, automatics, mechanical manual wind movements, and tourbillons, when they're at 80 hours, they're at their most accurate, their most high performance. But then, of course, when they get down to below 20 hours of power reserve, the accuracy is wider, plus or minus 10, for example, to plus or minus 15, to plus or minus 20. So, to give an accuracy rating, I will say yes, when it's at 80 hours, this one is running consistently at plus 6 seconds per day, which is actually impressive. It's between -4 and +6. But, of course, when it gets down to below 20 hours of power reserve, then it runs plus or minus 10. It's variable. That's the point I'm making. That's just the way it is with the Hangzhou Tourbillon, the caliber 32D0E. It is accurate when fully wound. It's inaccurate when it's not. That's the trade-off. That's the negative I want you to be mindful of. But 8 hours is good. Manual winding is good. Hacking works well. Setting the time feels smooth. The only negative is it doesn't hack, but that applies to a lot of tourbillons. And as I've detailed, if it did hack, it could be detrimental and do damage to the movement. So I think it's okay not to have hacking. Doesn't have a second hand. Effectively, the tourbillon becomes the second hand because it rotates at 60 ticks per second, or 60 beats per revolution. So one doesn't really need hacking because you're not going to be setting this to precisely to the second. There is no second hand on the dial. The tourbillon is the second hand effectively. I like it. I think it's an excellent movement. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So, to remind you, if you use the discount code MERKURWATCH088, that will reduce the price point of this piece by $20, which is $379 or €327 respectively. Yes, I'm going to declare it excellent quality, and yes, I'm going to declare it excellent value at €327. It's a fantastic piece. Build quality, quality control, materials and finishing are excellent. I like the dial, I like the blued hands, the blued screws, the quality of the polishing to the flying tourbillon, quality of the polishing of the case throughout is mid-tier level, not low-tier level. The only negative, subjectively, and I'm being very critical here, is the laser etching on the buckle and tang. I'd prefer to see engraving, but one has to be magnanimous because the movement used in this piece is fantastic at €327. The Hangzhou Caliber 32D0E is reliable, it's well proven, it's beautiful. Skeletonized, mirror polished, decorated with blued screws, 80 hours, can be regulated to chronometer accuracy. This one is +6. I think it's fantastic to see a flying tourbillon made by Hangzhou, skeletonized and mirror polished, decorated with blue screws at the €327 price point. We're not looking at a microbrand selling this piece for 500 plus. This is 327. The movement alone fully justifies the price point. One cannot say it is not excellent quality and excellent value using a Hangzhou Caliber 32D0E tourbillon. The movement is well worth the money. If this were 400 or 500, yes, I would still say excellent quality and excellent value, purely down to the movement. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Merkur Tourbillon, reference 2759793. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.